Now, please allow me to introduce Dr. Charlie YERKOVICH, another scholar with a dual background in both ICOM and the university. She is a professor at Columbia University and also the chair of ETHCOM, of which I became a committee member in 2020. Sally and I have had plenty of meetings online. When we are having our routine meetings, her morning is my evening. She has led us in the revising the ICOM Code of Ethics for museums, and at the same time provided the ICOM Executive Board with a great deal of advice on coping with major museum ethics crisis. I'm truly glad that we can work together. The theme of her presentation is the power of museums, communities, values, and ethics.
Dear colleagues, it is an honor to be with you to celebrate ICOM's International Museum Day. I wish I could be with you in person, but I'm pleased that technology allows us to be together, even though I am halfway around the world. I want to thank the director of the China National Silk Museum for organizing this important event and for his invitation to speak. It is a privilege to share the platform with so many distinguished colleagues, especially the president of the Chinese Museums Association and ICOM China, the vice president of ICOM's executive board, and the vice president of the Chinese Museums Association and ICOM China, the deputy director of the National Cultural Heritage Administration in China, and the president of the China National Textile and Apparel Council. Today, I will speak briefly about the power of museums, communities, values, and ethics. For I believe deeply that museums are indeed powerful institutions, and that their power comes from their ability to have a significant impact upon people's lives. A museum's power is grounded in the values that we as museum professionals share, and in our professional code of ethics that expresses how we translate those values into practice. It is as a result of this rootedness, in part, that museums hold the trust of the public like no other institutions. This has been demonstrated in the United States in public surveys that seek to understand how museums are perceived. Even given the turmoil of the last few years, the pandemic, Black Lives Matter, increasing concerns about the climate and political polarization, to mention only a few of our recent challenges, museums are still trusted more than researchers and scientists, local and national news agencies, the government, corporations and business, and social media. One must ask, why is this so? Why are museums trusted institutions? The same study showed that museums are trusted because they have authentic objects and because what they do is based in research. Museums offer independent and objective information, allowing people to draw their own conclusions. As such, they are places for lifelong learning and have enormous potential to shape civil society. Although the survey that I mentioned was based in the U.S., museums everywhere share the characteristics that make museums unique, important, and trusted. Authentic objects that lend legitimacy, and staff who are recognized for their expertise. With the trust of the public, though, comes responsibility, a responsibility to serve society, to be relevant not just to the people who've been coming to our museums for years, but also to their neighbors and friends across the social and economic spectrum, as well as to the people from around the globe whose collections we safeguard. We must ask, as social, economic, and environmental challenges become more urgent, Can museums maintain their relevance and the trust that they hold while sharing their authority and engaging more deeply with their communities? Over the past 10 to 20 years, museums have increasingly been collaborating with their communities, and conventional museum practice has started to evolve. Today, I will highlight two examples of these changes, one from an art museum in the United States and a second from a regional transportational museum in Zimbabwe. Both exemplify values that museum professionals share and illustrate the kinds of transformations happening in museums, transformations that will help ensure that museums continue to be powerful institutions well into the future. In early 2021, the Crystal Bridges Museum of American Art in northwestern Arkansas began a pilot community engagement initiative with the purpose of building trust, welcoming diverse perspectives, and nurturing authentic relationships with the communities it serves. The program cultivates relationships by pairing local social service agencies with artists and developing projects that work for both the communities and the museum. For example, a local artist, Khulud Sawaf, became a partner of the Arkansas Coalition of Marshallese. The largest Marshallese community in the U.S. is located in Springdale, Arkansas, near the Crystal Bridges Museum. Many Marshallese were forced to leave their homes as a result of U.S. nuclear testing on the Marshall Islands in the Pacific Ocean. With its mission to empower the Marshallese community through culturally sensitive programs that educate, foster leadership, and advocate policy, the Arkansas Coalition of Marshallese was an ideal partner for Crystal Bridges in a project whose goal is to preserve the culture and wisdom of the community's elders, empower and engage Marshallese youth, and discuss policies affecting the community. The project centered upon building a traditional Marshallese canoe. Canoe building is a sacred tradition in Marshallese culture. When a canoe is carved, the whole community participates. The canoe serves the entire village, yet the carving is a special skill granted to a specific family that maintains the tradition. So for 4 weeks, master boat builder Linton Beasa and his youth apprentices were on site at the museum, building a wooden outrigger canoe traditionally used for navigating the lagoons and waters of the Marshall Islands. The canoe was made from a dead tree harvested from the museum's forest, and the process of building the canoe transmitted not only boat-building skills, but also community stories and wisdom inextricably tied to the tradition. After the canoe's launch, the outrigger was installed at the museum and is now the site for ongoing programs that tell Marshallese stories and explore the Marshallese journey and culture. As such, the canoe continues to help the Marshallese community navigate new waters while it introduces other museum goers to the richness and complexity of Marshallese culture. This example demonstrates how the Crystal Bridges Museum is taking its arts program into the community to help tackle issues of inequity and work towards social and cultural integration. In eastern Zimbabwe, the Mutare Museum is employing participation, collaboration, consultation, and negotiation as a means to decolonize the museum and engage with issues of economic livelihood, poverty, displacement, climate change, and education. The museum has repositioned itself as a change agent and an important community anchor through a series of co-curated projects that incorporate local ways of knowing. Ngoda, The Wealth Beneath Our Feet, was a temporary exhibition that reframed the museum as a place for social change and a forum for public dialogue, the first of its kind in Zimbabwe. The exhibition focused upon one of the largest surface diamond mining fields in sub-Saharan Africa, 60 miles southwest of Mutare. When diamonds were discovered there in the mid-2000s, the government encouraged local villagers to freely mine the diamonds in order to appease them and to garner votes in the coming election. The action, however, precipitated a diamond rush, attracting people from all over the country. So shortly thereafter, the government realized the economic potential of the diamonds, closed off the diamond fields to all but formal mining operations, and ended up displacing the villagers. The Mutare Museum's exhibition drew upon multiple sources of information, from the analysis of diverse news sources to object biographies of mining tools as told by the villagers who procured, used, and disposed of them, from interviews with community members who were affected by the displacements to ethnographic observations of formal government mining operations. The exhibition explored the contentious issues surrounding diamond mining and the loss of cultural and land rights by the villagers. An open dialogue among the government, the community, and civic groups ensued, and the long-promised and long-delayed financial compensation from the government finally materialized. The Mutare community continues to use community collaboration as a strategy to tackle social challenges and make a difference for its community. Through exhibitions and programs, the local communities gain a presence in the museum where they can see themselves and find their experiences validated. Both the Mutare Museum and Crystal Bridges are expressing social values central to the definition of a museum. They serve society as they communicate social, economic, and cultural inclusivity. They value diversity, authenticity, and respect. And they continue to maintain and build trust among their communities, both the communities in their immediate vicinities and the communities whose objects they hold. Museum values are inextricably tied to principles integral to the ICOM Code of Ethics for Museums, the most influential standards document produced by any organization for the international museum community. The code defines the principles that underlie museum practice and guides decision-making. 3 of the code's 8 principles relate to museums' community connections and ties to public service. Principle 4 addresses the educational role of museums and its programmatic activities. It states that museums have an important duty to develop their educational role and attract wider audiences from the community, locality, or group they serve. Principle 5 notes that museums hold resources that provide opportunities for other public services and benefits. While this principle was fairly narrowly construed in the 2004 Code of Ethics, it was limited to identifying illicitly trafficked property as well as authenticating objects. It is safe to say that in the current revision of the code, this principle will be expanded. And finally, Principle 6 stipulates that museums work in close collaboration with the communities from which their collections originate, as well as those they serve, and it declares that it is important that museum policy is responsive to this situation. While the current Code of Ethics is in revision, we can only expect that these elements of the code, the museum's educational role, and its role in working with communities, will only be reinforced and expanded. As the authors of Museums as Agents for Social Change note, the question of how museums, in spite of their histories, can continually reinvent and transform themselves into sites for engagement with diverse communities is topical, urgent, and universal. The ongoing debate on changing the definition of a museum by the International Council of Museums encapsulates this universal desire for more inclusive engagements with communities. It is the critical reinvention and transformation of museums that will enable museums to maintain their power, but it will be a different kind of power. As the Mutare and Crystal Bridges museums demonstrate, by employing a people-centered approach to their exhibitions and programs, museums become forces for change. No longer temples on the hill apart from their communities, museums can become instruments of social integration, like the Crystal Bridges Museum, or agents for local communities, as in the case of the Mutare Museum. Thus, museums open themselves to take on critical roles for and in their communities and transform their power to benefit for all. Thank you again for your invitation to speak today, and best wishes on this International Museums Day.